Hey, y'all. This is Wendy again. This next section that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be talking about diet and lifestyle. Everybody that I talk with in a weekly and daily way has a view and has a belief of why they are eating and doing the diet that they are doing. Some people have a media-based type of diet that they like because they know that the people that they respect in the news and people they respect in the world eat a certain way. And maybe this has influenced why they eat the way that they do. Some people are younger and they had maybe seen a video or the way that animals were treated via slaughter or something that made them sickened and they could never eat meat again. So there was more of an emotional response. Some people are sick. They just can't eat anything. The foods that they can eat are so few that they have really ended up eating what they eat and the way they eat simply because they were kind of forced into it by their body health condition. I'd like to start part one today by asking you, do you have a reason how and why you eat the way you do? I know that for many years, I just kind of grew up eating the way my family ate. And then as I got into health a little bit more when I was younger, I incorporated some new thing that was supposed to be good for this or good for that. So if I do nothing else in these videos, what I really want to do about diet is help you to think. My desire is not to tell you to eat the way I think you should eat, but I would like to explain why things work the way they do so many times with the human body. You might say to me, everyone's an individual. Every person's different. Everybody eats different because every body's different. Well, that may be true for different reasons, which I'll get into. The foundational truths about diet have been there for absolutely forever, since the beginning of time. One of the reasons that people may not be able to eat what someone else may be able to eat is they might have bugs. You might have candida, you might have leaky gut. You could have SIBO, which is small intestine bacterial overgrowth, or you might have SIFO, small intestine fungal overgrowth. This can greatly influence what you intuitively feel you can eat and can't eat. Like I just recently had a client say every time she eats meat or fat, she feels heavy. She doesn't feel good. Now, if you understand that the liver has to break down fats, especially fats, using bile, and if your liver's congested or you have a lot of stones, this could be a highly problematic thing. You might feel sick every time you have good quality fat in your stomach. So there's also reasons why you might not be able to eat what other people suggest you should eat. You might say, I can't do that. So that's what we're going to talk about. I mean, this is a huge subject. And what I'm going to do is just try to break it down point by point. What I'm going to do is try and also do this via authors and books, people I recommend, things that you can read. So I always want to say this. The most perfect diet in the world for anybody can't be perfect if there's leaky gut, health issues, liver issues. So I think what happens a lot is that people have decided what they think the best diet is, because when they tried to go paleo or they tried to go low carb or they tried to go keto, whatever it was, they felt sick. They couldn't do it. As a practitioner, I would like to just suggest that you keep an open mind on this and maybe consider the possibility that you couldn't do a diet or something didn't work for you, not because the diet inherently was wrong, but it might be the condition of your gut and it could be the condition of your body that negated your ability to actually do it. And that's why it's so valuable also to work with a nutritionist and a person who understands diet, to understand how to bring some things in and the way that you might want to do it that's going to help change the liver and work on some of the issues that can happen when you bring back in a completely real foods diet. So I would like to ask you a question today. And I just recently did this at the school where I teach nutrition. And when I did it, even the youngest person in the class understood it. And there was a young child there. So this is very, very simple. And I'd like to ask you a question. You see this line? This line here that goes from one end to the other? This is the beginning of time, as you know it. This is the end of time of people on earth eating. If I was to ask you right now where we and the time we're living might be historically, where might that be? So what I did when I taught is I said, does that look about right? I don't know. I kind of put it in the middle. It doesn't have to be in the middle. But I'm drawing a dot to give you a visual. If I was to ask you a question about how people have eaten since the very beginning of time, here we are. Oops, there. They didn't have Albertsons. They didn't have Stater Brothers. They didn't have the way to get food that was brought to them. You didn't have people saying, you need to eat plant foods only. Remember this. They would have had to grow those plant foods. They would have had to grow the greens. They would have had to grow all these things that are now readily available for us. So what would have the diet been for these people? How did people start eating wherever they lived? You know, this is where we go back to people living wherever they're living, and they're being susceptible to, you know, the climate. They're susceptible to so many things. Look at our world today. They're susceptible to flooding. They're susceptible to drought, famine, all sorts of things, right? If you are going to grow a lot of plants, you really have to have the irrigation to do that. And I would imagine that people have lived all over the world in varying climates where they just never had that wherewithal. And I would also submit to you that there's been people all over the world who have lived in climates like Siberia and parts of Alaska, where I think for about 5 months of the year, they live on moose and blubber fish. That's all they got. And every meal is a derivative of that. There's no going out to the garden to get greens. There's no going to a health food store to get greens. They're not living on a lot of greens. If they have any vegetables at all, most of the times in Siberia and parts of Russia, they have root vegetables that they keep in the cellar. That's why they're called cellar vegetables. And these would be things like carrots and maybe some beets, maybe some squash and things that would keep, you know, for a few months into the winter months. But eventually it's gone, and they're living on, you know, basically we like to say animals from nose to tail. They used everything. They used the skins to even keep warm. So this has been done long, 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 long before we have the media and various people like the show on Netflix talking about Game Changer and the way that people are supposed to eat. A lot of people who really prefer a plant-based diet can do so over maybe sympathy for animals. And a lot of things that they talk about sometimes are proven wrong, though it is a thing that's regularly said, like we need to get away from eating animal meats because they have too many problems that, you know, they're pooping and they're doing all these things on the earth. Really, once you start going to plants only on the earth, you have other problems. You have problems with soil. You have plants, the way that the soil works and the ground works. And so it's a very, very big subject to just sort of blow off like I'm only being vegan and vegetarian because I don't want to hurt animals. Well, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news to you, but if you are vegan and vegetarian, you are. Because in order for, here in Southern California, we see it all the time. If you're having fields and fields of greens, you have to kill animals to keep them from being predators on you have to kill the birds. You got to kill all the rodents. You got to kill possums. You got to kill mice. You got to kill rats. You got to kill, I can't remember everything that's out here. Tree rats. There's a bazillion predators that are going to try and get you. So, I mean, there's always animals killed, right? Coyotes, always. You got every kind of animal trying to come in. And you might say, well, coyotes only eat meat. Not when you're growing fruit. They all love fruit. Okay. So it's just a really bigger picture that I think people really want to think about. But I wanted to give you the visual of the line because I want you to think about something. Your heritage, who you came from, is in your genetic makeup of your body. And that means there's genetics involved with maybe how your genetics, your people before you have eaten. And it makes those foods for you a little easier to be eaten. People from Russia, again, like I said, beets, lots of root vegetables, but lots of meat. Lots of certain things that they live on through those cold months. They don't have, you're not going to really find a lot of vegetarian and vegan people there. If you do, they got to be eating out of cans and they got to be, I don't know how they're doing it. So I'm not saying there can't be, you got to think this through. So one of the authors, I've got a stack of books here of lots of different people and websites that you might be interested in sort of getting a view for yourself of the right kind of diet. Right now, we're not talking about gut issues so much. I'm just talking about lifestyle diet choices. How should I eat? How should you eat? So the thing that I would like to show you first is one of the most classic books out there. I am a Weston A. Price chapter leader in my area, which is a volunteer position where I like to discuss this a wonderful man who lived in the early 1900s, and he traveled the world by boat because there was no planes. And this is the book he wrote, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. It's a classic. When you become a nutritionist, especially in a naturally minded school that you go to, this is the #1 book that they recommend. Really, it is fantastic. It's kind of thick. Let me show you. It's a little thick of a book. Lots of pictures, lots of tribal pictures from many tribes. And because Dr. Weston A. Price was a dentist to start with, you know, he looked at your teeth are bones. So your teeth portray and show how your bone structure is. Your facial width shows how your bones are, right? So he makes wonderful cases in this book. He describes all the tribal peoples that he went. Like I said, there was more indigenous people then that he met and traveled through. He did do Switzerland, and he did those kinds of areas. Of course, he did New Zealand. He did the Maori people over there. He did Native Indians. He talked with people in Africa. He actually went everywhere, as many places as he could. And what he'd like to do is take samples of food back and study them. And he was trying to figure out why some tribal people had, as he said, teeth like piano keys. They were that beautiful. I'll show you some of these pictures. And he took pictures of some of these same tribes where different civilization sort of type people had infiltrated. Like, I think one of the ways was through missionaries. I'm not against any religion. My point is that when outside people came in and they brought with them things like condensed milk and jams and all sorts of things that were created by civilization, these people now were exposed to different kinds of foods than just their tribal ways of having their raw foods. And now it was different. So what he did was he tried to show a lot of teeth and pictures of people's teeth that had no sugar, especially sugar, and none of these foods that came from civilization. And he took pictures of them all. And I want you to look, for instance, at this picture of these people and how wide their faces were. See how wide the faces are? And look at those teeth. There are no braces there. This is natural teeth that these people have. And again, width of the face, width of the features, you can tell. So he studied that. And he just was curious why some people had amazing teeth and facial structures. And then he would go to other tribes and he would see something else. And I'll show you a picture of this. So this is a tribe where they were eating foods that had sugar and all sorts of food in them. And he started looking at their teeth. If you can see some of these teeth. Can you see some of these? I'm going to try and get this the other way. You see the loss of teeth? Not just the loss of the teeth, but you can see how the teeth are sort of mismatched and moved around in the mouth, which in our days, someone would have braces. And we have children born today that are born needing braces. We have mothers who can't have babies because their hips are too narrow. And we have a lot of, C-sections, et cetera, because of, we don't have wide enough hips and the bone density. So we have a lot of problems with this nowadays. So what Dr. Weston A. Price is speaking of in this book and showing you in this book is that the physical health of so many tribal people was always when they were eating real food. No sugar in it. Usually, I hate to say it, most of you guys, but most of it was a lot of meat and blood from the meat and raw and unfermented or raw or fermented dairy from a goat or a cow. There's a tribe in Africa, the Maoris, which is interesting because I used to love watching Anthony Bourdain's shows, and he traveled a few years ago before he passed. He had traveled to Africa, and he actually visited one of the tribes. Not the Maori, I forget the name of them. They're an African tribe anyway that are in this book, and very, very tall and very slim warriors. And they only live on meat and the blood from the animals. And when Anthony Bourdain went there, they actually sat with him when they killed an animal, and he drank the blood and did everything the tribe does. Now, this tribe has held true for hundreds of years, and the health of the tribe and the way they eat and their lifestyle has remained true. And these are very, very, very healthy people. Very strong people, and they run for miles and miles and miles a day, in their daily things. And so what he really wanted to bring out when he was doing this was, as he traveled to every corner of the earth, different parts of the earth produce maybe some different food. But you need to go with me, you guys, when I'm talking to you about diet. And before there were stores to go to and health food stores to pick up food, how often do you think in a year they got berries or fruit? I mean, if you were living somewhere and you had to get your food, even if you grew it, you might only have a couple months of the year. You were not able to go buy or get fruit in a store. So I would say the average diet was more than likely hunting for animals. And let me just suggest here to anybody who doesn't like to eat meat and who's scared of eating meat and who only eats lean meat when they eat it, these indigenous peoples never looked for a lean animal. You wouldn't look for a lean animal to hunt to get meat. You would look for the fattest, healthiest animal basically out there, right? So they hunt for the fattest animal. They used every part of it, nose to tail. And do you know what the most important food from any animal was? You would just think, we like in our society today, we go for the steaks and everything, but really it was organ meat. So they would separate the organs, the kidneys, the heart, the liver. They were the most precious food, the brain even, many tribes. And they would separate the organ meats for those people in the tribes who were weak and infirm, maybe babies, maybe pregnant women, maybe the elderly. And they knew that these were the most nutrient dense foods out there. At the end of this video, I'm going to put a link here down below to read about liverwurst and liver pate and to read about how important liver is for restoring the body's health. I have found it for myself and for my clients to be absolutely mind-blowing how healing organ meats are for our bodies. If you don't like them, I buy liverwurst. It's got no sugar, but it's been spiced and it's in it, and I slice it and it tastes really good. I get it from US Wellness Meats, and I'll put that link below. And it comes frozen. And I'm actually able, as I eat it, it'll last a couple of weeks out of the fridge, and I just eat it either on its own or over eggs or something else that I'm making. But liverwurst is so potent. When I put this little 5-minute video down below on liverwurst, I'd like you to watch it. It has absolutely every single supplement, every single vitamin and mineral in it. One of them being iron. Another one being selenium. Selenium is one of the known minerals that very few people get anymore. We know there's some in Brazil nuts, but again, anytime with nuts, you're looking at an anti-nutrient problem of trying to get the best out of nuts, grains, and seeds, because they have a coating on them. We really need to soak them, sprout them, germinate them in order to even release the benefit. And here you can have liver, which you don't have to do any preparatory work for, and your body assimilates immediately the good from it. Selenium, we know a lack of selenium is a known factor in almost all cancers as well. So selenium is highly valuable. And so many people who are anemic, again, I want to just put a word out there if you're anemic to please get checked for H. pylori, which is a bacteria. Many people are anemic from that. The second thing to get tested for if you're constantly anemic is if you are gluten intolerant. So if you are gluten intolerant, there's a high possibility of being anemic. The third possibility is just that you're not eating meat, and so lots of iron in beef liver, chicken livers, but more so in beef. So all the organs are beneficial. Every part, usually every culture of the world has some food they eat that has organ meats in it. And I think it's kind of going by the wayside now. And it's really ancestral wisdom that people knew this. Even in Asian countries, they use it a little differently in the way that they eat organ meats, but again, they're eating them as well. So anyway, I really want to recommend this book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. Highly recommended book. If you're on the fence about knowing how to eat and you're just not sure, please pick this book up. I would also recommend the WestonAPrice.org website. There are so many articles. Follow them on Facebook. Follow them on every social media, Weston A. Price Foundation. Wonderful. I can't say enough. I could do a whole video only on the Weston A. Price, who he was and the foundation. How amazing. I want to recommend another book from the Weston A. Price. Should you be, maybe you're having a baby or just had a baby, maybe your baby can't do breast milk or you can't produce breast milk right now for some reason, and you'd like to go more natural than doing formula and the things that are out there in the stores. There's a wonderful, the head person in the Weston A. Price Foundation is Sally Fallon. And Sally Fallon is one of the authors of Nourishing Traditions. So Nourishing Traditions is another fat, big book with tons of recipes of real food. Like, as I said, maybe you're nursing and you need food for that baby and you want to use real food. You don't want to buy even organic canned food in a store. Maybe, this is a cookbook that challenges politically correct nutrition and the diet dictocrats. We are marketed how to eat, even on commercials. So this is a valuable, I think I've had this one 15, 20 years probably now. Valuable book. I think they have more books now. They have one for children even to follow, to learn to cook. And it comes again from a real food, ancestral base diet. So again, Sally Fallon, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, and it's Weston A. Price Foundation. Okay. Joining up as a chapter leader and other chapter leaders that will be in your areas. You can go to meetings, you can write them. They will send you a resources list. I have a resources list for the area I live in, where I will send you places that you can get completely grass-finished meat. For the state of California, we're a little tricky on raw milk if you do want that, because the state governs that. So we can get Organic Pastures brand that are in health food stores, but going to a local farm to get raw milk is a no-no at this point in our state, unless you have your own cow or you're living on a place where you can get your own milk. That's not to be sold in this state. But anyway, if that's the case, as I say, I always put my email up here so that you guys can find me, and you can always email me here, and you can just say, hey, send me the resources list. Okay, for the Weston A. Price Foundation resource list for the area that I'm in, which is Hemet, Winchester, I can even say Temecula area here in Southern California. So go ahead and do that. This is my website, so you can always find me on my website. Another book on diet that goes really well along with nutrition and physical degeneration and the Weston A. Price Foundation is this book right here. It is written by, let me see if I can show you guys, Kate Shanahan. Down here at the bottom, it says Catherine Shanahan, MD. She, I think for a few years anyway, she was the nutrition coach and doctor for the LA Lakers. And the name of the book is Deep Nutrition. You can find Kate, C-A-T-E, Shanahan on Facebook and all social media. I follow her on Twitter. Wonderful book, Deep Nutrition. Get this book. I'll give you a little reason why I love it so much. I had breast cancer in 2004, and I also happened to have the gene in my family that, if you know who Angelina Jolie is, she had the gene, and she's an actress, and she had her breasts and I think even now her uterus removed because she was so worried about having this cancer gene in her. And one of the things I love is not just our genetic histories, but that our bodies are able to, we call it epigenetics. That means you might be born with bullets in the gun for your genetics, but that doesn't mean that they all need to be fired, right? That those bullets don't need to be fired. So what I really love about Deep Nutrition, I love this book because Kate Shanahan goes into epigenetics, and she goes into why it doesn't mean if you have a genetic history that you're going to have and things are going to happen to you the way that your genes dictate. And because of companies like 23andMe, where they actually tell you, this is your genetic these are your genetics and these are your potentials for illness, disease, and death. It scares a lot of people. So what I always want to say to people is your genetics do not determine your health. They do not determine the way you're going to die, the way it's all going to go. So Dr. Shanahan here, I really enjoy her because she talks a lot in here about epigenetics and how, we can change our genetics. We can change our body's response to food, which in turn then becomes our body's response to stress. Our body's responses are so, people don't understand, for instance, even a lack of magnesium in the body can so affect our reactions to any stress that comes in our lives. I mean, if you're dreading stress and you avoid any stressful situation, you don't even want to get in your car and drive or go anywhere. A lot of times it's your body's sort of wisdom because you're not, you might be deficient, and you're deficient in certain minerals like magnesium that would give you a peace and a restful state. We don't want to be walking around living in fear and stress. So many things determine whether those genetics you have are going to actually be fired. And are you going to have this thing happen to you? Do you have enough magnesium? It's needed for something like 379 body processes right down to your mitochondria. I mean, you have to really think, is it my genetics that's giving me this problem? Or is it possible I inherited a lot of things that I'm deficient? I didn't learn to eat right. I don't have a plan of how I eat. I don't know why I eat the way I eat. I'm deficient. Now I've got some gut problems. Maybe I've got some yeast and bugs that are stealing my nutrients. So there's a lot of things going on. And so sometimes what happens is we get this simple response from 23andMe or somewhere that says you have the potential to have this disease, and we're just done mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. We're done. We just think we're going to die. I want to tell you that you have power. I had my breast cancer in 2004, did not do chemo, did not do radiation. I did have a lumpectomy at the time. I don't know if I would nowadays, but anyway, I did. And then after that, again, ancestral diet, traditional diet. I will say the top basic three things I would say that are the three things that are destroying absolutely everybody. And I would even put number one above sugar, and that is industrialized seed oils. So what are those? You could go to a restaurant that cooks on they cook $1,000 plates of food that it would be the most high-end place you could go. And they still can cook with soybean oil and trans fats. So it doesn't, you could order in a restaurant the best food. You could order vegetables with a nice side of vegetables with a really nice clean cut of meat and perfect food. What did they cook it in? So these trans fats, they're ubiquitous. They're everywhere, right? One of the reasons I buy very expensive meat and cook them at home is because I know exactly what I'm eating and the fat that it's cooked in and what my meat is cooked in. I'm very particular over that. Canola oil is not good. It will destroy your gut. Canola oil comes from the rapeseed, and I can do some info at some point on fats down the road, and we can talk about why certain fats need to be avoided. And these industrialized seed oils would be sunflower oil, safflower oil, canola oil, which is not technically a seed, but sort of is rapeseed. Even grapeseed oil. People tell me all the time, well, grapeseed oil is good. Oh, really, it isn't. Again, you have the ways that they even create these oils. They run them through a slurry, and the slurry has, a lot of times they have heavy metals in them that they use. They also deodorize them. Think about rancid fat. If you have come to this Christmas and you maybe had some nuts from last Christmas and you try to eat those nuts and they've gone rancid, that's the oil in the nuts that make them taste horrible. Oils go bad. Oils don't last long. You freshly squeeze oil, you've got to use it. So how are they keeping these oils in health food stores and even just in a regular store on the shelf for 3 and 4 years? You look at the expiration date is years. How? They have to change the oil. So the number one thing I say, you're trying to change your diet and you want to know how to eat, you don't have a plan, look at the fats that are in your diet. You buy nothing prepared. If it's processed and prepared, even in health food stores, read that oil. Organic salad dressings all have soybean oil. Stay away from soy. Run from soybean oil. We've now just this week, there was an article that came out. It was a peer-reviewed article that it destroys your brain. You're unable to think after having all these processed industrial oils in our foods, and they're in even organic foods. So the soybean oil, that's everywhere. Canola oil, and don't even allow it if it says organic. It'll say organic soybean oil, organic canola oil. It's evil for your body, okay? It destroys it. It'd be like if any man is watching me, especially men. I'm not saying as a woman you can't be into cars this way, but mostly it's men. You can't put the wrong oil in your car. If you have a beautiful Maserati and you put the wrong oil in, you're going to destroy your car. Same with gas. You can't even put the wrong gas in there, right? So the whole idea is we have to have the right fuel. And oils are so important. These trans fats, these bad fats. I mean, every one of our cells that are reproducing every day have a permeable cell membrane. And guess what trans and bad fats do to our cell membranes? They harden them. Why is that important? Because insulin and hormones need to go in and out of that cell. That's why the wall is permeable. If that wall of the cell is hardened from trans fats and lots of donuts. See, donuts, yeah, it's the sugar problem. But more than the sugar problem in donuts is these trans fats that they're cooked in, right? That they're fried in. So you harden that cell wall. Now you got insulin resistance. You've got insulin, can't get inside the cell. Hugely important issue. These refined seed oils are also all omega-6s, mostly omega-6, all seed. Even if you're doing hemp oil, same thing. It's a seed. Remember this. So do I recommend good fats? Yes. Omega-3s are great fats. I personally use avocado oil to cook in. I use coconut oil to cook in. I use butter. I like ghee, Ghee. Ghee is clarified butter. That means they've removed all the dairy aspect from the butter. It's called ghee. It's Ayurvedic. A lot of people from India love their ghee. I think in America now, there's a lot of people on farms now making clarified butter. I mean, it's become a very big thing. So I can cook in ghee. Ghee has a smoke point of like 400 or 450. It can go very high heat. So really, we don't need, when you see an oil that just says vegetable oil, what does that mean? I always ask people this question. I hold it up in the class and I say, where does this come from? And everybody's looking at it, and especially young people, they read it and they go, well, vegetables. It says vegetable oil. Well, that's pretty vague. What vegetable? Well, so finally they come back to, well, there's other oils up there. It says corn oil on them. Isn't corn a vegetable? No, corn's a grain. This is one of the biggest problems, that people think corn is a vegetable. Corn is indigestible. I'm a colon therapist. I see corn coming through whole every time people eat it, right? So anyway, oils. Number one, oils. Number two, sugar. Don't eat sugar. Sugar's going to kill you. Above sugar, though, I put sugar really at number three. I put first these industrialized seed oils and refined oils. And then secondly, I would put grains. So grains, we have big problems with grains: wheat, corn, soy, rice, all the grains. I want to say to you, all of them. So everybody goes, oh, you mean gluten? Let's just talk about grains, nuts, and seeds. They have something called lectins. That means when you eat them, they have these, and beans too. I mean, it gets in your bloodstream. Very, very hard to digest, very hard to assimilate. Phytic acid, all the anti-nutrients. Why do all these nuts, grains, seeds, and beans have anti-nutrients that surround them? Because they grow and they have to be ready for drought. They have to be ready for flooding. They grow outside. They're in the weather. How do these plants and trees repropagate? They have to drop their seeds. Those seeds are protected. Those seeds have to go through a process to even grow. If you've planted a garden, you put it in the soil, you water it, it's got to have sun. And then all of a sudden, this little thing comes up. And when you look at that little green thing coming up, there's no seed coating on it anymore. What's coming up? That little green thing. That's your new plant. But what had to happen to it first before it actually started to grow? It had to break down. It had to be in the dirt, had to be in the dark, it had to be wet, it had to have warmth. And all of a sudden, it starts to open. What we are doing in our society, especially with vegans and vegetarians, is buying tons of beans, tons of seeds, nuts, grains. And all we're looking for is one word on that package or on that bulk container. And what is the one word? Non-GMO organic, right? Does that make it ready for assimilation into your system? Does that make it ready for digestion? No. If you read about, again, going back to this book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, one of the things Dr. Weston A. Price noticed was that a lot of these indigenous people would take their beans and take their seeded things, and they would hang them in bags in streams, for weeks, for a week, of the water running through to soften the bean. They knew that these were almost indigestible, or they ground them out. They're very hard to digest. So you have to imagine this with nuts and grains and seeds. You got this phytic acid coating, impossible almost to digest when they're raw. Soy, forget it. If you're eating edamame, if you're eating raw soy, run from that. I have never seen so many GI problems as with people who are living on soy, especially Hashimoto's and different autoimmune disorders. Please check, even if your supplements, even if your vitamin D has soy as a base. Check women if you are on hormone creams, whether you've got a soy base. If it's compounded by a pharmacy, you call that doctor you have, or you call the pharmacy and you ask for what the base ingredient is of your vitamin D or your hormones, please. Okay, so we really want to get away from grains and nuts and seeds for that reason. And then if you are going to use soy, only consider fermented. That would be tempeh, that would be miso. But be careful, because even some people still can't do that. In Asia, when they eat it, they don't eat it like we eat it here in America. I mean, it's ridiculous what it's in here. Everything, even dog food, cat food, everything. So be careful. Okay. So what's another problem with nuts, grains, seeds, and beans and all of these things? I would like to ask you, especially if you're a farmer or you grew up on a farm or you know about how things grow, once you have harvested your grains, be it corn, wheat, soy, or rice, any of it, once it's harvested, where does it go before it can be sold? In most places in the US anyway, it's kept in something called a silo. A silo is a place that you keep grains, you keep all these things either to feed your animals throughout the winter or to sell later. Problem is, silos are what? They are dark. What else are they? Damp, right? We're going to have a problem with mold. Did you know that in the United States, our EPA tests for the amount of aflatoxic and mycotoxic mold on all grains, nuts. Well, usually mostly grains. I'm not sure on the nuts and seeds as much, but I know for sure on grains they do. I know on wheat they do. I know on corn they do. Corn is the highest mycotoxic and aflatoxic containing food in the world. Second is Spanish peanuts. It's how much mold's on them. And so what they have to do is test. So what they do is they originally test how much aflatoxic mold is on them, because they know it's going to be some, and they allow that for human consumption. When that goes too high, then it gets shuffled over to the factory farm fed animals. Like I said, I eat meat. I do not eat factory fed animals, but that's the next place it goes. So all that corn goes over to the cows in the factory farm, who sit there in one little square spot, and they don't get the sun. They don't get to chew grass, and they sit there every day eating grains, right? So then they get those grains. What else do these cows in those factory farms get? They get a lot of antibiotics, and they get growth hormones and things to help them, because they're not out in their natural habitat, right? They even have a shorter life because they're not having a normal ability to be out in the sun and get their vitamin D and the chlorophyll from the grass, etc. So anyway, after a while, the corn that has been shifted aside for chickens and for cows and all of those, when that aflatoxin and the molds get too high for them, what do they do then? They send it over to distilleries, and distilleries are going to make alcohol with it, right? So that is a really common thing. And this is what I like to tell people. Mold is more of a problem than people even realize. I believe that mold is the biggest problem. I think mold in the gut, SIFO. SIFO stands for small intestine fungal overgrowth. We all know about SIBO, but SIFO is a real thing. So I really, with grains, nuts, and seeds. Let me also say a final thing about grains, nuts, and seeds, that people that live on a lot of them. There's a wonderful book, and it came out a number of years ago, and it's by a doctor named Dr. William Davis, MD. It's called Wheat Belly. And he's a cardiologist and spent 20-something years, working with people that had heart problems. And it didn't take him long to start figuring out that these people that had very heavy stomachs and very heavy in the front, you see a lot of men like this. You do see women, but a lot of men too. And again, high cholesterol. And then they've got this big, almost looks like they're inflammatory. The person looks inflammatory, very puffy. He started to realize that all these problems that these people had, as a cardiologist, he's doing this every day. He started to realize they all had a certain kind of diet in common. What were they eating a lot of? Quote unquote, healthy whole grains, right? And he wrote this book, which became a bazillion seller. And now he has a diet book that goes with this on how to get off of these grains. People's cardiology problems are disappearing like crazy. He came out with a second book a couple of years ago now called Undoctored. So Dr. William Davis, MD, is now running even groups online to help people get off of wheat, to get off of the grains, and to start governing their own health and taking back their health. And this is a doctor who was in the MD field for many years, who understood the damage of wheat, corn, soy, all of these grains. Unbelievably, if you're diagnosed with diabetes and they hand you at a hospital the glycemic index on, and you see the paper of the list of the glycemic index, what do they have? The highest recommended foods for a diabetic? They say unprocessed whole grains, wheat, all of these grains, corn, soy. You know what the number one thing they do, other than not digesting when you eat them, that they do? They spike your blood sugar and your glucose so high that if you do a blood test, a glucose test an hour after you eat, you're going to be through the roof, right? What do we all grow up on? Waffles, pancakes, toast. So this whole situation with whole grains has really got to go. It was a thing from the 70s, 80s, 90s. It was really marketed to us as well. We had a lot of agricultural people, just like with milk. Milk does a body good, and people with milk over their lip. Milk raw can be okay for some people no. But this pasteurized, homogenized is not doing a lot of people good. It's creating a lot of plaque and problems. So again, okay, so I said the three things. The first one is don't eat these refined food oils. Do not touch them. Okay? That means if you eat out, you got to be very, very, very careful. If you say to the place you eat out, please don't cook in this kind of oil, or don't cook in any oil at all, be careful, because they'll still cook on the same platform that maybe had it on there before yours. And so you're still going to probably get some of that soybean or peanut oil that's already been on the griddle or on the pan. So be careful there, right? So don't eat the oils. The second one, grains. And if you're looking at this thinking, how do I not eat grains? What would I eat all day? There's lots of things to eat. It's a different paradigm. You've got to switch the paradigm on how you think about food. In 2001, I went wheat free and mostly completely grain free within the next probably 18 months after that. And so I really, unless I get it unknowingly, I really don't eat grains at all. So I really just want to present to you the problems with grains that I've tried to present here today. And then that third one's going to be sugar. Sugar has so many problems. I can't even go into them all. But there was a book that came out in the 60s. And this book is so great. So if you remember in the 60s and 70s, we actually had newspapers. You know what? The big thing of every morning was your parents or your grandparents reading the newspaper. And we had reporters who were at that time amazing. I mean, the papers were the thing. They were the big deal. So there was a reporter at the time, and his name was William Dufty. And William Dufty, I'm trying to turn this right. He has won many, many awards. And during these, I think it was the late 60s or early 70s, he actually met he was around the same age or a little younger than the actress named Gloria Swanson. And he met her and they started a relationship. And this whole book really starts with him being about 350 pounds, meeting her, starting dating her, and her helping him to get off sugar. But what he did, which is so great, was as a reporter who's used to digging into everything, he did the best book on sugar there's ever been, in my opinion, ever been. Sugar Blues. But this book is not like any other book on sugar. This book goes into historical things about sugar that you probably don't know. One of them that I loved was the chapter on cigarettes, especially in the USA. Our tobacco here, everybody thinks that we're addicted to nicotine. Oh, I can't quit smoking. I'm addicted to the nicotine. I'm going to wear a patch. It's sugar. What do they do with the tobacco? They just put sugar all over it, right? The sugar is everywhere. But when you read this book, you're going to be mortified. You're going to be blown away. And when he wrote this book in the 70s, can you imagine now what our sugar intake is? He talks about sugar. Another thing, people who are smoking cigarettes in Europe, they're just getting tobacco. So you see an old person, 100 years old in Europe, smoking his rolled cigarette. He doesn't have a filter on it. The filters that we get on our cigarettes are loaded with toxins in the filter. We think we're helping it. We're not. He's just got tobacco. So yeah, smoking isn't great for you, but all he's got is plain tobacco there. What we are getting it's got everything in it. It's got butane in it. It's got poisons in. Our cigarettes are horrible and people are dying from them. Now, I'm not even sure that I could say to you necessarily dying from the tobacco. I think it's a lot of these additives. And anyway, read that. He gives you a lot of historical stuff on the Crusades, this war. Here we are again. The war and the Crusades, and how these Muslim fighters, the warriors, they were told by their captains and their leaders, do not eat sugarcane. When they were eating sugarcane, it was like a drug. It was like an opiate. They couldn't fight. So many interesting things about sugar and sugar's beginnings and how sugar came to be. So I think it's a fascinating book. I don't think you'll be bored. If you're like me and you love reading anyway, you're going to be fascinated through this entire book. One of the chapters, you guys, I got to say this quick. I know I'm going on a long time on this, but one of the chapters was on scurvy. And I've always was told as a kid that scurvy was a lack of vitamin C. And that's why these Brits on the ship were called limeys. They were called limeys because they all got scurvy and they had to have limes so that they got their vitamin C. What nobody told me, and what I found in this book, was all these people got scurvy because they were on these boats going to places like Jamaica. And what were they living on? Rum. It was sugarcane. Rum is made from sugarcane. These people were living on booze. They were living on rum. They were living on alcohol, that's the scurvy, right? So it was destroying everything. So really fascinating book. Really well, good. I've got to finish this. I'm at 45 minutes. I want to do parts. I don't want you guys being here forever in my videos. I'm trying to go shorter. I get going and I can't stop, but I'm going to do part 2 on diet. And there's my website right there. You can find all my info there and what I do. I also do teach nutrition classes in the local school district, and the classes, if you go to my website and click on, if you look up at the top where the tabs are and you click on it, it'll tell you the dates of the classes and the times and the address. And it's free to you, which saves you money. And you get to take home a PowerPoint and you get to ask questions in the class. So I'm going to run. I want to encourage all of you to have a great day. Really want to, have you think. My whole idea about helping people with diet is to help them think. I think we have so many ideas in our head about what a good diet is and why it's good. It comes from the media. It comes from people we just like that talk about it. It comes from something. I know in my, being as old as I am, it was Adele Davis. She had all the health books in the 70s and 80s. And I remember all of those. The big thing back in the days I grew up was alkaline, be plant-based, get away from meat. The macrobiotic diet was so big. And this was, I do believe at least one of them, if not both of them, of the couple that started the macrobiotic diet, which was used for cancer supposedly and everything. I think they died of cancer. I mean, it was grain-based. It was no meat, but lots of grains. Again, we're going back to a time of those 30 years where we weren't allowed to eat good fat, right? We all lived on margarine and all these created things so we didn't get heart attacks or whatever they were lying to us about. We were starting to worry about cholesterol and not eat meat, and especially don't eat red meat. And that's a subject we're going to talk about, why red meat has been absolutely demonized, right? And saturated fat, which is found in meat. And we need saturated fat for the very makeup of our body, but everybody's avoiding it. So we're going to talk about that further. But anyway, I don't want to keep going. I get too excited and I just want to keep going. So I'm going to talk to you guys later. I'm going to put this here up at the YouTube site. I hope you subscribe. Please subscribe to my videos. I talk about a lot of different things. And I'm going to start having guests on. So too, there's not going to only be me. And we're going to keep going with this. But anyway, you guys, we'll talk to you soon and have a great day. Okie doke. See you later.